Do girls play with dolls?
Yeah.
I think so.
Do boys play with dolls?
No.
No?
Yeah,
Yeah?
but not very often.
Girls like to play with guns.
I don't think so.
No way.
Boys like to play with guns.
Guns? Yeah.
Yes.
Girls like to wear dresses.
Yes. Yes.
What's so funny?
I can see this coming.
One of the first things children learn in life is whether they're boys or girls, what psychologists call gender identity. This knowledge will affect how they dress, what toys they play with, how they act, and who their friends are. Male and female are powerful categories in their social world. In this program, we're going to see how children apply these categories to themselves, how they discover which sex they are. We're going to learn how to think about psychological differences between the sexes, and we'll hear about the preference of males and females to associate with members of their own sex. Researchers are beginning to ask a new question as they study gender identity. No longer do they wonder if the psychological differences between the genders result from biology or the social environment. They know the answer is both. So now they ask, how do these differences and how does the meaning of being male or female change over the course of a life? Those who study gender identity realize that no matter what kids say, being a boy or a girl goes a lot deeper than just wearing dresses. Rebecca is 2, and she has a brand new baby sister named Melissa. Now, is Melissa a baby boy?
No, she's a baby.
She's a baby. Is she a baby girl?
Yes, she's a baby girl.
At 2, Rebecca knows the words boy and girl, but she's only beginning to understand what the words mean. She'll tell you that her baby sister is a girl and that she is one herself. At least most of the time she will. Children Rebecca's age have much to learn about gender identity. This is Michael Stevenson, professor of psychology.
It's probably best to think of children at this age as sort of naive information processors. There is all of this confusion out here and all of this information that they have to figure out a way to organize. So they're looking around for nice, clean, simple categories to put things in. And male and female, or this gender distinction that we're talking about, seems to be an extremely important one. And if you think about it, you can pretty much divide the world into these two categories. So that's a very powerful piece of information to have.
When do children know where they fit in this world of two categories? When do they know they're a boy or a girl? Research indicates they have some kind of understanding even as early as 18 months, but it takes them much longer to know why they're a boy or a girl. Lara is almost 4. Are you a boy or a girl?
I'm a girl, didn't you know?
How do you know you're a girl?
Because of my mommy. I wear dresses. You know that.
Professor Jacqueline Eccles is an expert on gender identity.
Most kids that age aren't using anatomical parts to decide whether someone is a boy or a girl. They're relying on cues that are related to dress, hair length, toy choice, play activities, and things like that. There may be some kids who live in families where the family has made a point of labeling anatomical parts and have explaining to them that boys have penises and girls don't, and those kids may give you that explanation, but it doesn't appear that that's what they base it on if they are reaching those conclusions on their own.
Lara knows she's a girl because she wears dresses, but she's not yet sure she'll always be one. She doesn't yet have what psychologists call gender constancy. Professor Stevenson.
Sometimes you can even ask young children, what would Sally be if she put on a pair of pants and cut her hair? It's not uncommon for the response to be, well, then she'd be a boy, because the things that determine gender for young children tend to be physical kinds of things that are changeable.
By the time children go off to school, they have gender constancy. They know that boys grow up to be daddies and girls grow up to be mommies. And they know that gender identity is not a matter of the clothes they wear. But knowing isn't always the same as saying, even to a 9-year-old. Are you a boy or a girl?
A boy?
How do you know?
How do I know?
Do you want to pass? Do you want to pass?
Pass, yeah.
Are you a boy or a girl?
I'm a girl.
How do you know?
I can tell by the body parts of some things.
What's the difference between boys and girls?
Sometimes the way they talk and sometimes the way they look. Boys don't wear dresses.
Would you rather be a boy or a girl?
A girl.
Why?
Because girls wear dresses when it's hot out and they can wear bathing suits, bikini bathing suits. It's easier being a girl.
Long before they know what sex they are, and long before they know why, boys and girls are acting differently. Gender differences have been found in aggression, for example, and to a lesser degree in verbal ability. But what is the origin of these differences, and how great are they? The story begins in the nursery. Professor Stevenson.
One of the first things that we ask, physicians who are delivering babies is, what is it? And we, being the adults in the environment, label the children from the very beginning. And we consistently do that throughout, in terms of the kinds of dresses or pants or whatever we put on them, the kinds of toys we buy for them.
And we make sure from the beginning that others get the label right. Has anyone ever said of a baby boy of yours, "Isn't she darling?" Professor Eccles.
The typical reaction of a parent in that case is to respond immediately with, "It's not a girl, it's a boy." And parents are very concerned about that. So we see blue blankets and pink blankets in the nursery. They go out of their way with newborn babies to make it clear what sex the child is.
Researchers have found that parents will estimate a boy baby to be larger than a girl baby, even if the children are in fact the same size. They also treat boys rougher and don't cuddle them as much. This despite the fact that baby boys are actually more fragile than baby girls. Professor Eccles.
Boys are more vulnerable throughout their lifespan, from conception on, as far as we know. You can take virtually any age, period, and you will find that the mortality and the morbidity rates are higher for males than for females. At birth, you find the same phenomena. Boys are much more likely to be born prematurely, to have difficult deliveries, to die early in their life from infections or from problems that they were born with. And that continues then throughout the lifespan.
And yet, if a parent picked up a baby boy versus a baby girl, how might they act differently?
Parents assume that boys are, in fact, stronger. So you're much more likely to find parents throwing boys up in the air, engaging in a lot of rough and tumble play with them, stimulating their arms and their limbs, and seeing girls as being basically fragile.
In addition to being treated differently, boy and girl infants behave differently. In general, boys are more active.
They are more likely to flail around because they have less control potentially of their limb movements. They are more likely very shortly after birth to cry and to resist interference with their movements. So if you try to wrap them up in a blanket, they're more likely to find that uncomfortable and not like it.
This difference between the sexes is so subtle, however, that it takes careful, measured observation to see it. Even more subtle is another difference. Girls appear to be more sensitive to faces and voices.
If you show them pictures of faces, they will watch them longer. They will learn them more quickly than boys will. These are hard studies to do, but they're seeming to suggest that maybe there's something there about females attending more to the human voice and to the human face.
These gender differences continue beyond the nursery. Higher levels of activity may lead to higher levels of aggression. Professor Stevenson.
You'll find that boys are much more likely to roughhouse, wrestle, roll around on the floor, those sorts of things, than girls. This is true even if you look at sort of the extremes. If you look at the number of boys and girls who we label hyperactive, for example, you find that there are a lot more boys who are diagnosed hyperactive than there are girls. Some people have therefore argued that some of this activity level difference and then perhaps some of the aggression differences might have something to do with biology.
And these biological differences in activity and aggression are reinforced by adults.
When we watch that behavior, we usually say, "Oh, isn't he a real boy?" or something like that. If we see our daughters doing that, on the other hand, very often we'll get upset about it, or we'll say, you really shouldn't be doing that. That's not ladylike, on and on.
Something similar happens with girls. As infants, they're more sensitive to faces and voices, which means they might pay more attention to verbal cues. As toddlers, they will pick up words at a slightly faster rate than boys. Their natural ability will be encouraged by parents.
In studies of parents' behavior, you find that mothers talk more to their daughters. They verbalize more with them. There's a lot more of that kind of behavior than with boys. So if girls are predisposed to verbal sorts of activities in the first place, and the environment is treating them differently, encouraging that kind of behavior, then we're going to end up with a child who's much more verbal.
In the cases of both aggression and verbal ability, a biological inclination is strengthened by the environment. And yet the differences between males and females, especially in verbal ability, are slight. There is more variation between individuals of the same sex than there is between the sexes themselves.
When we talk about differences in aggression or any other variable between boys and girls, what we mean is that on the average, boys are going to be more aggressive than girls. And what that means is that there are going to be some boys who are less aggressive than the average girl, and there are going to be some girls who are more aggressive than the average boy.
This is how psychologists think about gender differences, which makes this 10-year-old boy a pretty good psychologist.
I mean, boys are more muscular, and that's not necessarily, but people look at it like that. Men are more muscular, and they can do more things. And if you take the weakest boy in the world and the strongest girl in the world, you can see, and it's not always true, and it's just that girls can do a lot of things that boys can do, but they won't give them a chance to do it.
Despite many exceptions to what's average, research confirms that when it comes to a fight, girls are more likely to talk it out, while boys are more likely to duke it out. That's true for this 5-year-old girl. What about girls? Do girls get in fights?
Mm-hmm.
What do girls do when they get in fights?
They get mad at each other, but then they can get the fight, and then they can just deal over the fight, so you don't have the fight anymore.
And for this 6-year-old boy who got in trouble for using a secret weapon. What'd you do?
Fighting.
Who'd you fight?
My brother.
But he's bigger than you were.
I know. Well, a punch in his nuts and he'll fall down.
Do you like to play with boys or girls?
Most of the time, boys.
Cool. Is that what you think too?
Boys. Some girls.
But let the record show that when he said some girls, his nose went like this. From the preschool years until puberty, children congregate mainly in same-sex groups. Given a choice of playmates of their own age, little boys gravitate to other little boys and little girls to other little girls. This tendency will last throughout the school years, and even longer. Professor Eccles.
Same-sex patterns in playgroups emerge as early as we can put kids together in playgroups. There have not been very many studies looking at infants because they can't move themselves around. They're not mobile. But studies that start looking at kids, certainly by after 18 months, when we begin to think that they have some understanding of what their gender is, and in environments where they can identify who is a boy and who is a girl around them, the kids start to sort themselves into same-sex groups. And by 3 and 4 years of age, this is full-blown.
Some people have argued that sex segregation is imposed by adults, but research indicates that segregation is strongest in situations where adults are not present. Are there other friends that you guys have?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a heck of a lot of them, too.
Are some of them girls, or mostly you boys hang out together?
Mostly
we hang out together.
Well, what would happen if, like, a girl sort of got in on your...
Hanging out.
Yeah.
We'd probably tell her to leave.
Probably.
In her studies, Professor Eccles has questioned school-age boys. Would they like to play with girls?
And the response of most boys is, girls are yucky. I'm not going to play with girls. And when we asked them, in fact, how their friends would react if they played with girls, they were very explicit about the fact that they would be seen as a sissy and that boys just don't do that the cost of playing with girls is quite high. Girls don't see that as much. Girls are much more likely to try to invade the male groups, to get involved in the male activities, to join the teams, to go and climb trees with the boys, and is also then less likely to be ostracized for doing that by her girlfriends.
In their segregated groups, boys and girls play differently. In most boys' games, somebody wins and somebody loses. They're competitive in nature. Girls' games, on the other hand, are more cooperative and require fewer players. The emphasis is less on winning, more on simply being together. In recess, would you go out and hang around with those guys?
No, they're too busy playing basketball and football.
What are the girls doing during recess?
Play games, walk around, talk about boys.
Talk about boys?
Yeah.
Like, who's a neat boy to talk about?
Patrick Swayze.
Patrick. Well, what's so neat about Patrick?
He's cute.
He's cute. Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that all it takes? You just got to be cute?
Yeah.
If a boy and girl are seen together during recess, they are often teased that they are going with each other, or even worse, in love. So in the school years, most cross-sex friendships go underground. Boys and girls may continue to play together at home, but seldom acknowledge one another in public. For a boy in particular, it's bad to be seen with a girl or even with anything associated with girls.
I didn't know a difference between a girl's bike, so I had my sister's old bike, and I kept on riding that, and I didn't know anything about girl's bike and boy's bike. Then my friend told me, "You're riding a girl's bike." I'm like, "I am? What's the difference?" The girl's bike has a little squiggly bar, and the boy's doesn't. It's straight. Then I told my father and said, "How did you figure out?" And my friend told me, "I want a new one. I want a boy's bike," and I got a boy's bike.
Professor Stevenson.
The rigidity of the stereotype for boys is much stronger. And I think it would be devastating for a young boy to have to ride a girl's bike. On the other hand, even young girls, many of them recognize that boys get to do a lot of things that they don't. And one of the ways that they can sort of get back at the boys is to ride a boy's bike. It can be seen as a more valuable object than a girl's bike, because it's associated with these people who get to do all these extra things.
Things will change once elementary school is over. In junior high, tomboys start trying to be feminine. Our young psychologist has seen it happen.
I think girls are more playful when they're younger, and they're not like in high school, and they're more playful, and they'll do just the same as boys. They'll jump around and play in the mud, and they'll do things. And when they get older, girls won't really do that, and boys can be more active than girls.
A preference for mud may disappear in the teen years. What won't disappear, with one exception, is a preference for associating with members of your own sex. The one exception? Dating, mating, and eventually raising a family. Other than that, the same sex preference will last for life. Fellas, if you had a sleepover, whom would you invite?
Andy
Andy.
or Todd.
Stephen, Hans, David, Josh.
Right today, if I had to pick somebody, it'd be Steve, because I haven't seen him in a while.
Okay.
That's the honest answer, too.
If I had a sleepover for my children,
No, if you had a sleepover for you.
for me, who would I have over? Oh my goodness. Do I have to answer this question?
And you girls have sleepovers, don't you?
Slumber parties, yeah.
Slumber parties, like if you were going to have one, who would you have over to your slumber party? If you were-
Melissa, Heather, Sunshine, Diane, Crystal, the girls I hang around with mostly.
Cindy and Lisa probably are the only two that would come.
Older friends. We've been kind of joking about that, getting together and just instead of talking until 3 in the morning and getting up and going, we'd have everybody just stay over.
Oh, for real?
Talk all night. Yeah.
Do you ever have friends come over to your house for a sleepover?
Nope.
No?
I'm not old enough.
For years, researchers have looked at the psychological differences between males and females and debated whether the differences are rooted in biology or the social environment. But today they are turning their sights on a different question. How do masculinity and femininity change over the course of a life? Professor David Gutman offers an answer to that question based on the well-documented gender difference in aggression. He asserts that there may be an important evolutionary reason why men, in the first half of life, are endowed with a greater tendency toward aggression than women.
I think it has to do with the fact that, by and large, men are the more expendable sex. You can lose a lot of men without jeopardizing your population levels over time. You can't lose many women. Therefore, if in our risky world there are jobs to be done that require aggression, the protection of children, the protection of communities, and so forth, it's much more apt to be the men who are sorted out for those tasks.
It may have been just as important that young women be less inclined toward aggression.
If young mothers couldn't put curbs on their aggression, they would end up by killing their children. Because children, babies, are very egocentric, selfish, demanding little beasts, however charming they may be. And they're also that. But they take a lot and they give little back except the occasional smile. Unless your aggression is biologically limited and also curbed, as it were, psychologically by psychological controls, your kid is going to be at risk.
In the hunter-gatherer societies that existed for over 95% of human history, there was a sexual division of labor. Men left the home base to hunt animals for food. Women gathered plant foods close to home. The men were responsible for protecting the community, the women for caring for children. An excess of aggression made a man a better hunter and protector. A woman's ability to control her aggression made her better at her tasks. Professor Gutman.
She's responsible for the inculcation of a very important sense in the child on which the rest of his psychological structures will rest. The sense of basic trust that there are good providers out there who are basically oriented towards my care, towards my survival. So the mother, because of her reduced endowment of aggression, has not lost something. Rather, she's gained something which is very vital for the continuity of species, of family, and society. The capacity to inculcate in their children a sense of basic trust.
The biological clock which paces physical development seems to have been set in accordance with the sexual division of labor. Very early in life, it amplifies a male's inclination toward aggression and a female's sensitivity to faces, voices, and words, a sensitivity to the intimate world in which trust is established. Social reinforcement helps. Boys play with guns, girls play with dolls. But later in life, things change, as we know from the study of many cultures.
As men get older, particularly, again, once their kids are launched, there's a strange kind of relaxation in these terms, an ebbing away, which shows up in hormonal levels, too, of the propensity towards aggression. And you see sort of flowing back in and sort of occupying the vacuum left by the more aggressive potentials. Some of the qualities that were hitherto, the milder qualities, the softer qualities, the more affiliative and nurturing qualities that were hitherto conceded to women as their special properties.
The opposite is true for women. If grandpa becomes sweet and affable, grandma becomes someone you don't mess with.
You see women emerging in a tougher guise. It's not that they give up being women. It's not that they give up the qualities of warmth and nurturance and sweetness and so forth that they may have had before. But they add something to that, a toughness, a spine, a capacity to stand up for themselves, to know what they want and to assert themselves in terms of what they want, not just, in terms of their kids' needs, but in terms of their own needs.
The net result of these changes is that the sexes become more alike in later life. With children grown and gone, the time has passed for a sexual division of labor, and there are fewer social guidelines.
We don't have too many definitions as to how people are masculine and feminine in later life. Because, until recently, we haven't had too many people living long enough to establish norms for that life period. Maybe this is one of the reasons why the social distinctions tend to break down, since there's less guidelines, since less enforcement from society. People are more free to live out their natural human desire to have the pleasures and prerogatives of both sexes.
Many questions have been raised about Gutman's view of gender differences in aggression. It may be true of societies that honor a traditional division of labor between the sexes, but what about our own? What about the childless who are neither mother nor father? What about single parents who try to be both mother and father? And what about dual career couples who often share the tasks of parenting? Do all these adults override the tendencies of the biological clock? We don't yet know enough to say, but we do know this. Gender identity is transformed over and again throughout the course of life. We learn and relearn what it means to be male and female. We find ever different ways of associating with individuals of our own sex and acting as they do. The creation of gender identity begins early in life, when children learn the power of the categories male and female, when they're taught the things that boys and girls should do and learn the things they can do. Can girls throw a ball?
Yeah, anybody can throw a ball.